Steve Winter says the following in his article on cobaltpress.com. Episode 2 is structured entirely differently. Characters are given a long-range reconnaissance mission, where they'll be on their own for days in enemy territory. No friendly NPCs standing by in this episode to tell the characters what to do. The situation is fraught with danger, but it's all up to the players to decide how much of that danger they tackle. If they simply watch from a distance for a few days and then report, they'll fulfill the minimum requirements of their mission. But how many players can resist the urge to take a closer look inside the enemy camp? This episode is all about learning how D&D lets players assess risks, solve problems, and interact with complex situations, possibly without ever needing to unsheath a sword or roll a damage die. Today we'll have a look at both the second and the third episodes of Hoard of the Dragon Queen, and as always try to take the best out of this experience. You're watching Lutes&Dice, and I'm your bard, Folkard. Taking into account that the players will never return to Greenest later in the campaign, I wouldn't spend too much time fleshing it out, and instead jump straight to the next step of the adventure, finding Leosin Erlanthar. The book can offer us a hook regarding bringing back some treasure and prisoners, but let's be real, this is actually about Leosin. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, it would help a lot if Leosin was someone really important to the PC, like a close friend or a brother. If you know that your players like to take their time, fool around and roleplay, then you should have a prepared tavern or a shop or two for your players to explore. Remember that the town is recovering after the attack, so build your environment with that in mind. For instance, the tavern might be packed with people who lost their homes last night. Anyway, the party is approached by Leosin's fellow monk, who asks to find his friend. He thinks that Leosin tried to infiltrate the enemy group, and he's afraid he might have been captured. The monk shows Leosin's choker, saying that that's all he has found. There are a number of things wrong with this situation in my opinion. Let's start with a minor thing. A leather neckband that the monk shows to the party seems to be a very specific detail that might lead the players to think it is something of importance. It's not. You might think it's not a big deal, but for me as a writer it seems irritating. Unnecessary piece of information in a game, the complexity of which will only grow with each session. Sometimes you'll want to introduce details that are only there for flavor, but as a rule of thumb, I'd recommend following a principle of Chekhov's gun that states that every element in a story must be necessary and irrelevant elements should be removed. This choker brings nothing to the picture whatsoever. That was a minor thing. Now, Leosin's actions seem rather questionable. Here's a quote from the book. Leosin had studied their previous attacks and concluded that the time was right for the cult to strike a bigger target, and he knew the Greenest was prosperous yet poorly defended, making it the most likely next target. So when he deemed the time was just about right, he visited the town with the intent of staying until something happened. His observations paid off, and Leosin separated from his people during the night and fell in with the raiders when they retreated, hoping to learn more about the cult's plans and the location of their camp. Rezmir spotted him after the sun came up, and the monk was quickly overpowered and captured. I would change this information in a way that he at least contacted Governor Nighthill to prepare some defense, rather than sit and wait like a maniac. And second, his plan to spy on the cult is very questionable. This is why I think so. He is one of the few, if not the only person, who believes that the cult is planning something of a great threat to the world. And he's investing his own time and resources into this, because he cares about the world. And then he takes on an incredibly risky mission on his own without passing on any progress on his work, without sharing anything. That makes him act like a selfish teenager, not a person to be respected and take orders from later on. Third, there's a thin line between developing a character and annoying the players. The fact that Leosin is not happy being rescued is weird. Again, to follow a guy like that, you have to be really thirsty for adventures. Tracking the raiders. First of all, this encounter might be a good opportunity to make use of weather effects. Mist and rain can affect visibility, wind and rain can affect hearing perception. For instance, you can roll a d8 to determine the wind's direction and give bonuses to perception or stealth accordingly, but that's entirely optional. So this is the part of the adventure where the players will start feeling more confident and try to capture some cultists to interrogate. That's why I would sit for half an hour and generate several distinctively different cultist characters. Have a silent mercenary type, a mindless fanatic, a couple that joined the cult out of despair and now regret their decision, and so on. As I've mentioned earlier in this series, I would pack this adventure with low-ranked cultists that don't know anything about the grand scheme, but should rather provide local-scale information. In the case of this chapter, the layout of the camp, what other villages they've raided, a personal stash somewhere in the camp perhaps, a password to enter the hatchery. That's in case you'd like to combine chapter 2 and 3, which we'll discuss in a minute. Just give each of these characters some purpose. One part of that purpose is obviously flavor, but another information. Scan your players' general direction of ideas and feed them info to help their plan, whatever it may be, come to life. If you want the camp to be a really immersive experience, you'll have to take your time and flesh out the camp. If you're good at improvising, that's fine, you can just go with the flow and come up with dialogues and events on the run. But I would write down a few notes about the structure of the camp, its factions and their relationships, and what they're talking about. The players are supposed to sniff around and eavesdrop on conversations around the camp. The book provides us with specific topics to overhear. We're here to praise Tiamat, there's a treasure in the cave, and so on. But there's just no way people would say those things all the time. They'll probably have normal conversations, normal for bandits. So get ready to provide fun and useful info for a player who decides to eavesdrop. Also, in chapter 3, it is said that Razmir is concerned about the spy in the camp. She orders everybody to pack their stuff and head north, and she leaves with them. That's why nobody's there when the party comes back. I would make it an opportunity to eavesdrop on this discussion, whatever form it had. Maybe there was a discussion and a note containing the destination that was passed to Mondath. The thing is, I don't think the hatchery dungeon is really worth an entire chapter. It's really nothing special. It has some cool features like the fungus area, Sturgis, and the talking roper, but to me it all seems out of place here. I would rather take this dungeon and make it a side quest thing sometime later. For this situation, I would simplify it and make it accessible in chapter 2, so that the characters see the eggs, take the note with the next clue, destination, and be on their way to the next quest. Here are some quick ideas on how to involve the dungeon in chapter 2. For instance, a very noticeable guy in full armor guards the cave. His body type perfectly fits that of a character. Wait till he goes to take a leak, whack him, and take his place. Maybe Leosin is about to be thrown to the Drake guards in the cave. That's the way to save him from inside the cave, more concealment. It may seem crazy to infiltrate the hatchery while there are still hundreds of cultists in the camp, but you can introduce another way out of the cave. It's a great chance to utilize spells like Speak with Animals to ask a rodent if there is a way out. Also, those troglodytes are somehow there. They had to come from somewhere. A tiny little journey through the very top level of Underdark and the party is on the surface once again. Finally, you can have everybody start packing as the party is still in the camp. They can be tasked with loading treasure on carts, and then they have to go and pick something from the cave. And the next thing you know, they're searching through Mondath's documents while she's taking instructions from Razmir. I mean, that's so much more intense than rescuing Leosin and then coming back and realizing that, oh, they left and now they have to catch up with them. You might say, but Folgerd, then going to Elturel makes no sense. The party can just follow the caravan right away. Well, yeah, that part didn't make any sense all along. There are literally so many weird plot decisions in this book. Don't worry, we'll cover chapter 4 later, but the general idea is, yeah, Hoard of the Dragon Queen can and should be shortened. I have no doubt about that. Be sure to check out my Tyranny of Dragons DM tips video to get a clear picture of the entire campaign. I realize that this video might be a little bit messy, but that's what this adventure is. My brain hurts when I try to justify everything that happens and bring some structure to this chaos. So feel free to ask me specific questions in the comments down below, and I'll try my best to give you my perspective. My final word of advice on this is: simulate your players' reactions to the events in the adventure when you prepare in your head. And if the reaction is, "What?" then fix it with my advice or your own logic to turn that reaction into, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." Don't get me wrong, this campaign has a lot of cool stuff. Fighting dragons is great and fun, but it's really not DM friendly, so stay with me and together we'll make it work.